Well, I'm in London, so I get to say good evening, not good morning to you.
Ah,
Um, and for those I haven't had the pleasure to meet in person, I'm Kate Howell. I'm currently third VP on the international board with the remit to look after PR and publicity and social media for our wonderful organisation. So I'm going to do my best to look after things in our session. We've got an hour and we're joined by two brilliant women who are giving their time, and huge thanks to that, to talk around how building strong media relationships can elevate your business. This is one of the LDI live online sessions that are dedicated to trying to support all the hospitality businesses and the amazing women in our organisation at the helm. So we're hoping that you'll get some great information from today, and there'll be plenty of time for questions and chat at the end. So please don't be shy. This is an interactive session and we want you to get the best out of it. It's all being recorded, and there are some presentations that accompany it, and those will be circulated afterwards. And any questions that come up, you can drop an email after the
did
session
not
to
get that
the
message though.
info email. I don't know if somebody hasn't got mute on, but there was coming in there. But we're going to introduce our speakers as a starting point for today. So we're joined by Sara Schiffer. Sara, hello, give us a wave.
Hi, everybody.
Who is the founder of a Denver-based PR firm, Proof PR, who I'm sure you will have heard of, because amongst other amazing clients, I think we'll call us their favourite client. I'm going to say that anyway. They've been looking after our PR for the last couple of years, and I've had the pleasure of working with them for the last year on promoting our organisation. Sara's got over 20 years of experience in the PR industry with a range of clients across the hospitality sector. She also helps chefs and restaurants launch their own brands. She's got huge expertise. I'm going to let her introduce herself to run through that properly. But she's in Colorado, where I've got a note here. She lives with two kids and their pups, which I think is the reason she's retreated today to a wee workspace to join us without the pups in the background. So Sara's going to talk through life as a PR professional, and then we're going to hear from Dame Patricia Cobe, who's joining us from New York. Give us a wave, Pat.
Hi there.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Pat is a hugely experienced journalist who is, amongst other things, the editor of Restaurant Business. She's also got 2 weekly e-newsletters and her own podcast, Menu Feed, as well as being an author of 2 cookbooks. So I'm very impressed that she's even got time to join us today. And she's a judge as well for the James Beard Media Awards. So we're going to hear from both of those amazing women, and then I'm going to have a little chat with them on opposite sides of the fence of being a PR professional and a journalist, and how those relationships all play out, and then lots of times for your questions. So hoping it's going to be a fun session. You're going to get a lot out of it. Thanks ever so much for taking the time to join us. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sara, who's going to kickstart things for us. Sara.
Okay, nothing like going first. Let's see how this goes. I'm going to share my screen. If I can find, here we go. Yep. Okay. Review. And then we'll go back to the beginning and full screen. Can everybody see? We're good? Okay. So today, as Kate said, we're going to talk about just how to understand PR and its role in media relationships. But I don't know, Kate, you did a great job with my intro. I don't have too much to add other than I started off like Pat in Chicago, lived there for about 10 years before moving west to Denver, and have built a small agency out here in Colorado with a great team. And we've learned a lot over the years about restaurants. So I think that expertise hopefully will help you guys in navigating media, really ever-changing media landscape. So that's me. Here I am. So the first thing I want to talk about, which seems like a no-brainer, but what is public relations? Because I think there actually is a lot of confusion as to where that falls in the overall scope of marketing. So public relations falls under the marketing umbrella. And the way I like to look at it is managing media relationships that result in earned media. And what earned media means is something that you earn rather than pay for. And you earn it with the strength of your pitch or how interesting you are or the news cycle or really any number of things, but basically you are not paying for the coverage that you get in the media. And I'll further explain when I say media, I generally am talking about traditional print, online publications, blogs, anything that you might read. You know, when I started, it was, you know, actual newspapers. And one of my jobs was to, you know, do press clippings, and it's called clippings because my first job was, you know, cutting the newspaper out and pasting it with a glue stick into a big binder for our clients. So thankfully, technology has helped change that. We don't have to do that anymore. But that's kind of where that terminology comes from. And I think in the last 15, 20 years, it has also, for better or worse, expanded into social media. Social media can be kind of a gray area because some of it is earned and some of it is paid, but you really are accomplishing the same goal of engaging with a targeted audience. And so I think if you ever are speaking with a PR agency or trying to understand your budget, you know, you might be confused as to, well, is it earned or is it not earned? And, you know, the answer is both. So the next thing is, what is the role of public relations in today's media landscape? And the way I like to think of it is we often find ourselves in the position of helping. So we understand that your first job, especially as a restaurant, is to feed your guests and offer the best possible hospitality experience, both culinarily, or even if you are a brand that, you know, is in the retail space, your obligation is to your customers. And so you don't always have the bandwidth or time to do that media outreach. And so much of it is relationships. So for example, I've known Pat for probably 15 years now. And so when I have an interesting new concept, or one of my restaurants has a new location, or Les Dames has a new scholarship, I know to just email Pat or the right person at the right publication, and they're going to open my email most of the time. And so I think that can help restaurants and other businesses sort of take that off their plate and understand what it is the media is looking for. And so part of our job is to work with our clients and really understand your brand and your voice and help shape those stories. Because not, you know, every brand has a large story, but often they don't always understand or have the benefit of an outside point of view as to what makes their brand special. And so I think having someone like a publicist, but really anyone, you know, whether you have a budget for a PR firm or not, asking a friend to, you know, say, hey, can I just like give you my story of my brand and can you tell me what you find interesting, can often be a really good way to understand what the public wants to know about your brand. The second part of that is really identifying the right media opportunities at the right time to present. So you may have a restaurant opening in 6 months. When do you start talking about it? When is it appropriate to break the news? And when will you get the most bang for your buck in terms of media coverage? So that's something that we work with our clients all the time on. And then also monitoring the media coverage that you do get, really, we like to call it listening. So we are really listening to the industry that you're in, both with your coverage, your competitors' coverage, and understanding what everybody is talking about right now and how can we put our clients or you or your restaurant in the conversation. That's really just such a big part of what we do. And it kind of goes into why media relationships matter. When you think about your brand and how you're reaching your audience, there are a number of channels you can use, but the earned media gives you what we like to call third-party verification. So that's a fancy way of saying when you see an ad in a newspaper or a commercial on TV, you know that the brand has paid for that. And so there's a certain level of, I don't want to say skepticism, but the audience knows that it's the brand talking directly to the consumer, and they can really say what they want and shape their message, which can be very beneficial. But there is an added benefit of someone like the New York Times or Restaurant Business Magazine, someone else telling your story that you have not paid for, and it adds a level of credibility to what you're saying. And in making relationships with the right media, you end up having a direct line to your customer or your consumer or your audience. And it really can help amplify the mission of what you're trying to accomplish and build trust. And I think that is where the earned part can really help with the trustworthiness of your brand. So let's talk about PR strategy. How do we help our clients? And I'll kind of take you through a few different case studies to show like this is where we come in, or this is how we ideate on what a good compelling story and what a good outcome would be. And so I think if there's one thing you take away from this session and how to interact with journalists, is to do your homework. Truly successful PR depends on thoughtful outreach and who you're pitching. And so, as a publicist or any agency, we have tools that we pay for that help us understand that on a large scale. But as a singular business and in a singular area of commerce, all that means is just reading the publication that you're trying to pitch, reading all the articles you can find on the writer that you're trying to pitch, and really understanding what it is they like to talk about. And that is the most important thing that we do. And over, decades of doing this, we kind of know it like the back of our hand and can, know who to pitch just in hearing the story. But it's not hard homework. It just does take a little bit of time. And I think Pat will speak to this or agree, but journalists, I think in this day and age, they are probably absolutely inundated with emails and they don't always get to everything. And so having a compelling pitch and really doing your homework as to what they might want to write about will just help. And so an example we put here is we work with the absolutely lovely Ileana de la Vega. She has El Naranjo, a James Beard award-winning Mexican restaurant in Austin. And she had a partner, a guest chef that they did a dinner series with, and he came in from Mexico and, did an amazing dinner. And so the idea, the event, the news nugget, if you will, is that guest chef, because Ileana is there doing amazing things all the time in Austin. And so taking that event or newsworthy moment allowed us to pitch their collaboration and get a TV segment on the local news about what they're going to be doing at the dinner. And so it was a great way for us to talk about what Ileana does in Austin all the time, but there was a leap for us to be able to get on TV because of the event. Another thing we work on is, and this can be sort of a broader campaign or a broader task we're given, is public perception. So it's not always about promoting an event or a menu or an opening. It's shaping what the public thinks about your brand. And we have had a lot of fun working with Einstein Brothers Bagels, which is, as you know, a national bagel brand, but they've been around a really long time. And it has been a goal of theirs to shape the public perception as the authority in breakfast. And so that's kind of what we have been tasked with. And I think when you have a brand that's been around a long time, which is an interesting challenge, you have to think about how you want the public to think of you. And so that can happen over, I like to think of it, it's really a long game. You know, if you're lucky, if we're lucky, we'll get like an amazing New York Times feature all about, you know, Einstein's and why they're the best bagel in town, which that's not, you know, that's a different managing expectations conversation that we usually speak with our clients about. But it's consistent outreach with a particular message over a really long period of time that will eventually lead to that perception or that brand recognition and reputation that you're looking for. And that can happen through a lot of different channels. And I think that's maybe the takeaway I would give to you for this. My old boss in Chicago told me this, and it's really stuck with me, but there was some study a billion years ago that said, you know, it takes 7 times for the public of seeing something for the public to make a decision whether or not to do something or not do something. And so it's not just that one New York Times article. It's not just that one social media post. It's not your billboard on the highway. It's all of those things. And you need to really think about how to get your message across in as many different ways and through different channels as possible to just try to get them to make that decision. Oh, that bagel looks delicious. I've seen it everywhere. I just read an article about it. Pat wrote about the new menu item in Restaurant Business. And then the eater folks who read Restaurant Business to see what the trends are in restaurant development and what's happening. They wrote about the bagel, and then we, you know, see it everywhere, and then people decide to go. The other thing that can really help, especially when you are maybe not a national brand or a national brand that's just entering a new market, is how to engage with your local community. And I think sometimes folks who think about PR and publicity only look at the flashy editorial pieces, and those are great. They're great for stakeholders. They're great for reposting on social media and getting that third-party verification, but it's not necessarily your customer in Cyprus that is going to see it and actually come to your store. And so I think you always want to think broadly, but also think on a community basis. And so something we work with our clients on all the time, especially for a restaurant opening or store opening, is how do we give back to the community? How do we engage with the right audience in the community? For this, we partnered with the Little Lion Foundation and did a give back day, hosting pet adoptions and free bagels. And that accomplished so many things. The media loves it because it's charitable and it's their audience and their community. The community loves it because it's free bagels, and who doesn't love pet adoptions? And it's just a way that to really look at the big picture and the whole picture of your community and what your goals are. And so I really encourage anyone who's looking to engage with a hyper local community, just make some phone calls. Think about what school is near you, what adoption center is near you, what charitable runs or walks are happening in your community, and how can we partner and engage and lift each other up, rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. The next thing, and Kate, how am I doing on time? Really quick.
You're good.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I can't tell if I'm talking really, really fast or really, really slow.
No.
Yeah. Okay. I mentioned in my introduction about crafting a pitch and subject lines and how to do that. So I thought I'd just kind of break it down a little bit in case people don't know. But I think your subject line when sending an email to a journalist is maybe the most important thing. It's really your foot in the door. And a few of my tricks of the trade are, I want to make sure it always says, you don't want to be misleading. I want to make sure like it really says what we're going to talk about. But I always want to leave just enough out so that they are curious and have to open the email. So for instance, if it's an Einstein Brothers pitch, or here, even this pitch in our example for Les Dames, local resident among National Culinary Award winners. Those are the facts. That is what the pitch is about. Did I say who the resident is, or where they're from, or what the award is? No. It's all in the body of the email, but we want to make sure that the journalists we're pitching are curious and open the email. I think the other piece of advice I'll give is, once you have established a relationship with a journalist, it is okay to be casual. Everybody is so busy, and they don't always need to see the whole formal pitch right away. So a lot of times, if we already know most of the people we are pitching, I might email Pat and say, hey, I've got a new a national brand opening next week. Do you have time to talk about their new menu item that they're launching? She'll say yes, and then I can send the formal pitch. You don't necessarily need every single piece of information. It could be a waste of your time and theirs. If they're not interested, you can move on and pitch someone who is. It also is a great way to build a relationship, just to be conversational and have a chat over email versus, an extremely formal pitch and press release. That being said, there is a time and place and use for a press release. I don't know that every publicist agrees with me on this. I think a lot of people are moving away sometimes from a press release, but I find them incredibly useful for a number of reasons. One, it's a great resource for your whole team. Press releases by nature are very dry, devoid of most, embellishments and tone. It's really the who, what, when, where that you're pitching. And when you have a lot of stakeholders or literal cooks in the kitchen, press release can be really useful to align internally on what the facts are that we're all talking about. But then it's also very helpful for the journalists. So some publications will actually just post most of your press release without adding too much. And the nice thing about that is the facts are correct. So you don't have to necessarily worry about things being misrepresented. It also is what I like to call a little bit of a CYA, cover your ass. If a journalist is writing more of an editorial piece, I know that I've sent them everything they need to know. My clients have approved it and the facts are correct. That's the goal anyway. Sometimes things change after the fact, and that's another problem. The other thing I think over the years that has become way more important than it used to be is good photography. That's maybe the first thing I talk to my clients about when we engage with them is, you know, if you spend no money on anything else, get a photographer and get really good photography of your food, of your space, of people enjoying it. It really, a picture does tell 1,000 words. Speak a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's what I'm trying to say. But if you have 30 seconds of time, maybe if you have 10 seconds of a journalist opening and scanning through an email, maybe not even reading the whole thing, but you have a nice photo or a compelling image in there, they're way more likely to read, but also they're more likely to publish. You know, publications are leaner than ever. They don't always have art departments. They don't always have the resources to, you know, send a photographer out and take a great photo of what you're trying to pitch. If you can provide that, your chances of being in the story are way more likely. Or if it's a roundup and you're going to be it anyway, you could be the headline picture, you could be the thumbnail. And that's worth a lot. And let's see. So yeah, supportive materials, photos, data, fact sheet. I'm a big fan of Google Drive. I think the days of physical press kits are over. So if you have a good, clean Google Drive that you know every image is solid, all the facts are there, your bios are there. I think media, Pat, I guess we'll talk about it in her section, but I do think they appreciate having everything at their fingertips. I think that's it. Kate, is there anything
Brilliant.
else that we talked about in our prep that I missed that you would like me to touch on?
I think that was a really, really useful overview. I've also written down my new abbreviation of CYA, cover
Oh,
your
yes. I
I've
learned
got
day
particular-
one publicist.
particular favourite there. Mine at the moment is TLDR, too long, didn't read, which might come into Pat
Yes.
getting emails with that. That was really useful. Thank you. We're going to have a chat to Pat now on the other side of it. So the person who gets all those emails from PRs or people trying to pitch their stories on what works for her and what doesn't. And then we'll come back and have a bit of a chat between us. So I'm going to hand over to Pat, if that's all right.
That's great. Well, Sarah already said so many of the things that I really wanted to touch upon, and we agree on them. So publicists and journalists are not adversaries, as some people think. We're friends and colleagues, and we really help each other. So I just wanted to start by saying, to get a grip on what I actually cover, we all have bios up on our website now. And so I just to backtrack a bit, when I started, which was over 20 years ago at Restaurant Business, we were all print. So that was the only way you could get a story published, was in print. And now we're all digital. So everything is up on our website. And if you look at my bio, I'm not putting this up just to, you know, brag, but it tells you what I cover, and I cover menu, food, and drink. And we have editors who cover tech, and we have another editor who covers like the fast casual segment, and we have an editor who covers finance. So when you pitch to me, I don't want to hear about a tech story or a great tech company, because I'm not going to cover that. And I just have to forward the email to the right editor, and it takes time. I'm also not going to write about a home cook who has great recipes, or a mom influencer who's, you know, all over TikTok, because we go out to the restaurant industry. So we cover operators, chefs, people ranging from the chef at McDonald's to the chef at Alinea or the French Laundry. So it's really a very broad spectrum, but we don't go out to the consumer, although a lot of consumers do read what we write, which is nice because they want to find out about trends in the industry. I also like to mix up well-known chains and chefs with, better known ones. So as far as knowing, what to pitch to me, I'm always doing small chains, large chains, well-known chefs, lesser known chefs. National, we go all over the country. So even though I live in New York, I'm not just going to cover the New York market. I cover the whole country. We even go global. We have an event called the Global Restaurant Leadership Conference. So we bring in people from all over the world who might be, might have Burger Kings or Einstein Bagels in another country. So I'm always looking for global trends as well. And I'm going to get back to this later about what is journalism, but for now, I'm going to get into the press release topic, which Sara covered a little. And I do look at press releases, but I am really looking for a pitch that is more personalized to our audience. We very rarely rewrite a press release. I know other outlets do that. It's something my editor-in-chief really frowns upon. He said, I want to hear the context. I want you to get quotes. I want you to get comments. So when you send, a pitch to me, and I don't just want to excerpt the quote that's in the press release because everybody can use that. So when you send something to me, if you say, I can get you quotes or comments from the chef or the owner of the restaurant or the CMO. If you don't say that in the pitch, then I will ask for that, because even if it's a story that is very timely and we have to get it out right away, I really want to have something from, that personalizes it for restaurant business. So this is an example. I just took some screenshots of some of the things I've done recently. We were getting pitches about Dubai chocolate bar creations from everyone, including IHOP, Shake Shack, the Milkshake Factory. It was just like a big thing about 2 months ago. But instead of doing a story on each of those, I decided to gather them all together, get some, small interviews with some of the people who had created these and talk about it as a trend. And then we actually can embed some of the TikTok videos in the story. So there is a lot going on TikTok about Dubai chocolate, and I put some of that in. I also got great images from the companies, the restaurants that were participating in this. So that really helped a lot. I mean, I can't reiterate enough how much images mean to us, because we do, and Sara mentioned that, we do have an art director, but we have a very small budget. So we use a lot of images that are sent to us. I would say like 95% of what we get. And otherwise we use Shutterstock, which is very limited. That's just a stock photo site. So the Dubai chocolate trend was really fun. We got a lot of pickup on this story. And we also do, whoops, this is not advancing now. There we go. So I also do a regular feature called Behind the Menu. And we have premium stories that we call them premium because they're behind a paywall. So one of the ways a lot of media outlets are trying to drum up subscriptions. Most of our content is free, but we're trying to, make another revenue stream with subscriptions. And so we have stories that we put behind the paywall. And this is one of my weekly columns. It's called Behind the Menu. And so for this, I take a deeper dive into a menu item. This is an example from California Pizza Kitchen. They introduced 4 new salads. So I had an interview with the chef. We talked for about half an hour. He gave me lots of insights into the R&D process behind these new salads. And that's why it's considered premium, because no one else is getting this story. So that, And storytelling is such an important part of our jobs now. That was one of the points I wanted to bring up too. And this is another way we premiumize our stories. We have 5 editors, and every 5th week we're responsible for doing what we call a Sunday story. So that's also a premium story that runs in our newsletter every week. But it has to be on something that's a really meaty topic and that will get a lot of page views, a lot of interest. So I did this one on wine. I cover food and drink, and wine is a special interest of mine. So I thought, why not? And there's been a lot of talk about Gen Z and how they're not drinking wine like previous generations. And so I took a deep dive into that. I interviewed 4 different operators who were actually using storytelling and other means to get Gen Z involved in wine. And I also used a lot of data from our sister company, Technomic, which has done a lot of consumer insight studies with Gen Z, but we also use data from a lot of sources. So if you ever can support a pitch or a press release with data, it's very, very useful to us. We like to, have that as a call out in our stories. So I've used things from Yelp, DoorDash, Circana, which used to be NPD, and all kinds of media data services. But we do try and use Technomic first because it is part of our company. And we also do team projects that we call them team packages or team projects. And so we did this one on climate change. And for this one, we actually did hire a photographer. I went up to a farm in the Hudson Valley, and it was actually a farm where one of the New York Dames runs the farm with her husband. So the La Dame can be a great source of people for our stories, and the connections I've made there are really valuable to me. So we went up to the farm with a photographer, and this is my story on climate change, but we had other ones, from all different perspectives. The tech editor wrote one, the finance editor wrote one, and we put these all together into a big package. And this actually won a Jesse Neal Award this year, which is really a very big honor in B2B journalism. So we were very proud of this. And I think it's such an important topic. And for this, I used some outside sources too, like there's Food for Climate Change is an organization that gave me a source for this. And these stories take, several weeks to do, but it gives everyone a deeper dive into a particular topic. And then we also do a lot of podcasts. And I know that Kate mentioned my menu feed. It's now called Menu Talk. But I do it with Brett Thorne, who's the food and drink editor of Nation's Restaurant News, who Sarah probably pitches a lot to also. But we alternate. And so if somebody isn't right for a story in restaurant business, I often have them on the podcast to talk about what they're doing. And this is Doug Keene, who had this very high-end restaurant in Cyrus. And he changed the whole business model and talked about it on the podcast. And then we can also do a follow-up story where we do some of his takeaways. And he's a pretty well-known chef, so people were very interested in that. And on the left is Barbara Sibley, who is the president of La Dame New York's chapter, but she's also the chef owner of La Palapa, which is a Mexican restaurant in New York. So we've been friends for a while. She doesn't have a publicist now, but I just said, I know that, you have a lot to say about the pandemic. We did a team package called COVID 5 years later, and we included podcasts from 5 different operators. So she was my choice of operator to talk to, and she was just fabulous. So, if you can't get placement in a story, a podcast is an excellent platform now because it gets a lot of play. And then the last perspective I have is on social media. And, you know, I like influencers as much as the next person, but I think that journalists have, I shouldn't say credibility. Influencers can give you instant gratification, and they can get something up right away about an opening or a new menu item, or if they're in a restaurant trying out a dish, you know, they take a lot of photos and you can get instant gratification. But what we try and do, we now have a social media producer, which has been like a godsend, because we all do our own TikTok feeds and Instagram reels and Facebook and LinkedIn. But what we now have is somebody who can put together reels from different stories that we do. And so I did the story on pumpkin overload just like last week, because I was really getting tired of writing about pumpkin spice lattes, to be honest. And I wanted to do something a little different. So I noticed that a lot of chains were introducing other fall flavors into the mix, even though they still had pumpkin, because I think someone would go to another coffee house if they didn't have their pumpkin. But now they're, you know, they were introducing caramel and toffee and apples. So we did a story on that. And then our social media producer put together the reel that went with it. So that really worked out very well. And I think this is where I am stopping.
Brilliant.
But I also wanted to get into some do's and don'ts. And I really, as I said, I'm really not at all negative about publicists. I love working with them. But there are some things that, you know, that sort of just to know that these are the things that really drive us crazy. So what we, let me just see, what I find really valuable, you know, I mentioned this already, do know the publication, do reread your emails for spelling mistakes before you send them out. Because I can't tell you how many times I've seen palate, you know, when they say something tastes really good on the palate and it's spelled like the artist's palette or the palette that's a crate. So that's one of my pet peeves. And Sarah talked about compelling subject lines and sending the photos along with the pitch or release. So don't make me ask for the photos, just attach them or put a link to Dropbox or to Google Drive so I can access them right away. Because I do get like 100 emails a day and I really don't have time to like ask you for the photos or ask you for a quote. And also, you know, speedy turnarounds are so important now because we really have, I mean, we publish every day, we have a newsletter every day, and we have to have a story a day now. So I really, when I'm asking for something, I usually need a very speedy turnaround. The other thing that I really find is a big do, if your client has a website, have their media contact on that website so I don't have to hunt around for it. I mean, I know a lot of publicists at this point in my life and I know who represents what, but if I want to write about a chain or a restaurant that I've never written about before and I haven't gotten anything on it, I usually go to the website and look for the media contact, which isn't always there. So, that would be, you know, a really good thing to include. And let's see, a couple of don'ts are, I really hate embargoed stories because it's really hard to keep track of when they should publish. So I get embargoed menu news all the time, and I don't see why we can't talk about a burger if it's coming out like next week. But if that's the case, then send it to me the day before because I really don't have time to keep track of every embargo, and we get so many of them. Also, know the name of my publication. I've gotten so many emails written to me that say, we want to put this in Restaurant Business News, or I think this would be great in Nation's Restaurant Business. So that's another pet peeve. And don't pitch the same story to me and my competitors. I mean, you can pitch a similar story, but give me an angle that works better for me. And let's see, also be patient, because we have, as I said, I get like 100 emails a day. I sometimes don't answer you right away. So don't ask me the next day, did you receive my email? Because I will get to it eventually. I don't delete a lot. I always go back and mark them unread and go back to them. And let's see, subscribe to our newsletter so you can see what we've been working on. And I guess come through for me. And that's something that Sara and Proof PR always does. I mean, if I ask them for something, they do come through for me, and pretty quickly. So I think that's a really important aspect. And that's it for me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pat. That's amazing. I really like your do's and don'ts, and the spellings particularly. One of my bugbears is when people get your name wrong at the start of it. That's always a good one to put you off. All of that was just so interesting. I'm going to ask you both a question for a little chat, and then I want to make sure that we've got enough time for people to raise their questions. So we might smush these two bits together, if that makes sense, and involve everybody in the conversation. But one of the things that came across really clearly from you both is the importance of relationships and what that means in terms of coming through for you, Pat, in terms of delivery, the quality of what's coming through, but also knowing who to pitch it to, and that your experience there, Sara, of the professional life that you lead. How would you both, if people aren't lucky enough at this stage in their career to have a professional publicist supporting them, and they're trying to do everything, run their business, start their business, they've got so much on, but they really want to make sure that they engage with their local media. And I don't know, one of you will give both perspectives on this. We'll throw it open. How would you say they're best to do that? We're not all, the three of us are in this game, and we've learned some of the tricks of the trade. But if you were just doing it for the first time, it's not what you do, you perhaps haven't got time for a press release, what's the best thing they can do for you, Pat, if they just want to talk to you about what they're doing and when to know how to come to you? And then Sara, perhaps we could touch upon that idea that not everything is news, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So Pat, what do you reckon if somebody's not a professional PR and hasn't got the relationship with you, but wants to pitch something to you, what would you say?
Well, I think if they send me an email and say, like I've often had new publicists ask if we could have a phone call just to talk about what we've been working on and how I can help you. So I think that's one way you can do it. And it doesn't have to be a phone call. It could be a Zoom, it could be Teams, but we always have, 5 or 10 minutes to talk to someone. So I think that's always a good policy. And if there's a way we can meet, I've met publicists for coffee. I know not everybody lives in New York, but if I'm traveling also, one of the things I forgot to mention is we do a lot of events, and that's another thing we need content for. So we are content creators and not journalists so much anymore. So and I think I got that point across with the social media and the podcast, but we also do a lot of events. So if you can come to one of our events and we can make a personal connection, the restaurant show is actually one of our company's events. And so if anyone comes to the restaurant show, I usually make time to, meet with them for 5 minutes and get to know them a little better.
Brilliant. It's all about the relationships. I love that. It's, where we are, a cup of coffee, if you can do it, is always a good one. Sara, we've touched upon this before. If you're passionate about a project and you've been involved in it, how does one distinguish between what is newsworthy and just something that a company might be very excited about, but not something that perhaps the external world is going to be as excited about? How do you tackle that?
Sure, yeah. I think the question to ask yourself is who you want to tell this story for you. And do they only cover news or do they write stories? And so the first thing I usually ask my clients to think about is, well, you've been working so hard on this. If you were explaining it to your friend who doesn't know about what you do, like how would you get them excited about it? And that's often a good exercise in just figuring out what those angles are. And then sometimes we look at really, the calendar. Like, okay, you have this new menu item. How do we fit it into what we know journalists are already going to be talking about? Like, Pat said, it's fall. You learn the seasonality of ingredients or what kinds of events people are thinking about, or it's holiday time and they're thinking about family. So our job often is to help our clients shape their stories with the right angles to make it an attractive pitch. Now, sometimes things are just interesting and that is a good story. It doesn't always have to be, news, but you have to understand who you're pitching and how do you make that story something compelling that they want to tell. And so it's often just a lot of conversations about, what is it? What is the meat? What is the nugget here that makes this so interesting to you, and how do we share that? And then there are also resources. Sometimes there just isn't a fit for earned media, but that doesn't mean there is not an outlet for you to share your story. And I think that's where this modern age of media landscape can be really impactful, because our CEOs or our finance teams or whoever it is, they all have LinkedIn pages. They have networks of people who follow them. And so, write it up. Let's write it up. Let's write our own story and post it. And let's see what comes of it. Let's see what kind of conversation we end up having on LinkedIn. And as a side note, most of the journalists you're pitching are on LinkedIn. So follow them and engage with them there. And then they will see what you're talking about. And it may not happen the first time you post something, but if a journalist sees like 3 things that you've posted, they're like, wow, that is really interesting. You may be able to start a relationship there and they'll be interested in the next thing that you do. So there are a lot of resources at your fingertips to get your story out there. And just it sometimes is a matter of understanding where is it going to fit best.
Brilliant, absolutely. And LinkedIn actually has transformed, I think, some of the ease of building these relationships, hasn't it? It's become a really important tool. I'm going to throw it open to our amazing audience who are here. And what I'm going to ask, and this is where I'm going to probably mess things up, but I've got lovely Sheila in the background. So if you've got questions or want to join the conversation or comments, just pop your hand up. I can see Eileen has already got her hand up. I don't know if she's dropped off the call or is still with us, but she did put something in the chat, which I think you kind of touched upon here, about how a business owner, not a PR professional directly, would pitch a story. But I think that actually some of that LinkedIn is really useful there. I don't know if either of you have got anything else to add specific to that, if you're a business owner wants to pitch something in.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, we're using LinkedIn a lot more too. I didn't get to mention that, but we put our Sunday stories up on LinkedIn, and we also write a little LinkedIn like story to put up to encourage people to come and read it. And then I use LinkedIn a lot more. I mean, I've seen people posting reels on LinkedIn now, and it used to be much more of a networking kind of platform, but now it's becoming more of a storytelling platform.
Yeah, that's really useful. I think that fits in as well, Pat, to something you were saying about think about podcasts as well. Think about the range of where you can talk to people. And if you're a business owner, as you were saying, they can sometimes make the most interesting podcast guests that can tell their brand story that might not be specific to the launch of a new menu item, for example, but they've got their own story that might engage you for that platform.
Well,
So,
and I think I'll throw it back to, it's about the relationship. It really doesn't matter if the pitch is coming from a publicist or a business owner. It's, do you know the person you're pitching, or how can you get to know them and make sure that you're pitching something they might be interested in? So aside from making, sometimes business owners don't, well, and hopefully you all know this now because we just talked about it, but sort of the do's and don'ts of what to make sure you're sending a journalist. Aside from that, make friends and pitch away, doesn't really matter. Although, hire a publicist if you don't have time. But
Well,
truly, not, that's not in everybody's, it's not possible for everybody. And really, it's just time. And you're paying for, 20 years of our time that we spent building relationships. It's not that we're anything, we're not any better at it or whatever. It's just making friends.
well, Asa,
I think also small business owners, like when we do La Dame events in New York, we often have them like contribute to a raffle or to, sponsorship. And that's a kind of economical way to get the word out about your business. Because we get, pretty good audience at some of our events.
Yeah. All of that's great advice, and don't do yourselves down, Sarah. 20 years of experience is what we're absolutely paying for. But I think you're right. I think it is about, the authenticity of some of this, and just absolutely going back to, it doesn't need to always be a formal press release. This can be a conversation. This can be, and it goes back to those relationships. I am going to throw, anybody got any questions they'd like to ask directly? And also I should flag there that lovely Tracy, who's with us, has her own podcast as well. So those people who are on the call about the Dames making relationships, remember you've got your fellow Dames there quite often running these podcasts themselves. So check out the directory to link up with people. Questions from the floor. Anybody got their hand raised? Tiffany, I'm going to throw it to you. How are you doing?
I'm good, Miss Kate. All right, so I am a founder and CEO of Dubois Public Relations. I specialize in event planning as well as media relations and stuff. And my husband's also kind of in the broadcast journalism industry for a very long time. But my main question is, how do you balance being friends with like your fellow journalists as well as communications professionals without feeling like you are still getting treated like the 5-year-old because you don't have as much experience as, everybody else?
Oh, who's going to take that one? Who wants to
Sorry.
jump in?
I guess there hasn't, even at the, I think the answer is to just be yourself and be casual. I think where people start to look or sound inexperienced is when they try to be more formal or follow a protocol, or a chat GPT says write it this way. I think if you've made that relationship, I would hope that someone you're friends with, or any professional relationship, is a mutual respect. And I think as long as you're honest about, hey, I don't have all the details, I still thought you might be interested, let's keep in touch about it. Like, it doesn't have to be so formal. And I think that's where I've had a lot of success in my career, is just being honest and casual and not trying to make things more complicated than they need to be. We're all human beings and not everybody has every scrap of info, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Pat doesn't want to know it's coming, and like, hey, like maybe in October we've got something really special, just I'm going to keep you posted. And that's all you need to say. And then in October we have more info. So yeah, I think you just be yourself. And if anyone's treating you like a 5-year-old, let me know. Like that's not nice. And
Yeah.
pitch
Yeah.
something else.
I
I think,
get that too.
Yeah.
I would also say, unless it goes beyond PR, and what comes with is the power of just saying, I don't know. You know,
Yeah.
we can't all know everything, and it's fine to do all of that. And actually the but I'll find out for you if that's if I need
Yes,
to.
I'll find out for you.
yeah.
Or I think also, at the end of the day, I think journalists do know that we are limited or beholden to our clients. It's not up to me what I tell you or what I don't tell you, or if someone can do an interview or they can't say something. And so those are just the facts of what we do. And so if someone's going to have at a certain point, our hands are tied. And as long as you're nice about it, it's like, I wish I could get that for you. They're not able to do it at this time. So sorry, things happen. And I think people have a general understanding of that. And if they don't, you can't win them all, I guess. And that is important as a publicist. You definitely, I have more crickets than responses sometimes. And that's a valuable learning as well. Even a client as big as, a national brand, they'll send a pitch and sometimes it doesn't land and you're just like, okay, you don't want to beat a dead horse, even if it's a priority for you or your client. It's just sometimes it's not going to happen and you just got to move on. And what's next?
And what next couldn't be a better way. That and that's without we are out of time, and I know we could go on, but there's been some hugely valuable information. I hope everybody's been able to get something from that. It kind of falls to me to thank you both for taking the time out, sharing your experience, sharing some really useful tips, which are really, really tangible, I think. We're going to be continuing this conversation, hopefully at another point on the sessions. My thanks to you both, Pat. My thanks to you, Sara, for your time today. You've been brilliant. We have got 2 more upcoming LDI live online sessions that I must remind you about. The 16th of September, we'll be talking about why you can't be ignoring the plant-based revolution for your business, building your brand. Vegan means business. And then on the 7th of October, and I like what they've done with this title, weighing in on GLP-1s, the weight loss medications that are transforming the industry at the moment. So check those sessions out. But yeah, thank you both ever so much for this session. The session has been recorded. There was a question about that, and the recording will be sent out to everybody that registered. So
really quick, before we say bye, should we mention what we've been working on for the chapters that's coming soon?
Well, do you know what? Thank you. I thought I'd covered everything, but you're quite right. Everybody that is able to access the member centre as a member of Les Dames, we have pulled together with Proof PR a guide to engaging with your local media and some template guidance on press notices. They can be found in the Members Centre as you log in from the website in the communications folder, and they've gone out to all of the presidents this week in a newsletter. So thank you, good flag. I knew I'd forget something and wouldn't get through it. So absolutely great flag. And thank you to Proof for pulling all those together for us. Pat, thank you so much from New York. Sara, thank you for joining us over there in Denver, and from London. This is over and out from me. Thank you all so much for your lovely
thank
faces.
you. It was a lot of fun.
Bye-bye.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.